All right. Well, we're going to get started here, and people can join on as they come. Good evening, and welcome to our final Thursday night live. We have saved the best for last, clearly. My name is Brendan Barnard. I'm the director of college counseling at the Derryfield School, and we have been doing this for over 2 months now. And this is the final one as we head into the summer, and maybe we'll pick it up again in the fall, but really glad you could all join us. This evening we have an amazing panel of admission leaders and experts, and I want to first just introduce them. Before I do that, I want to say that this is being recorded, and we'll send out the recording afterwards. And we're going to use the chat function to send any questions you have I'm going to make it available for everyone to see. And we're going to ask a couple questions to begin with, and then we will open it up to the chat for some questions. So without further ado, I will introduce these folks, and I've pared down your bios because they were incredibly impressive, but we don't have the whole evening. So I will start with Ken Anselment. Ken is the Vice President for Enrollment and Communication at Lawrence University. He is also the host of the Admission Leadership Podcast, The ALP, a series of one-on-one conversations with people who've been climbing the leadership mountain in college admission.
Just a moment.
And there is Siri. Sorry about that.
Doesn't like the ALP very much.
No, it's clearly not. If you haven't had a chance to listen to it, it's a great series of discussions with college admission leaders. And then prior to joining Lawrence, Ken served in various capacities at Marquette University, his alma mater, working in admissions, academic advising and development, as well as teaching first-year English composition. Man, I'm eager to hear about that. Next, we have Ryan Hargraves, and Ryan is the Executive Director of Admissions at the University of Vermont. And previously, Ryan was the Senior Associate Dean of Admission at the University of Virginia, where he provided enrollment leadership and served as chair of the Virginia Athletics Advisory Council. He is currently a doctoral student in the Educational Leadership and Policy Studies at UVM as well. So glad to have you with us, Ryan. And then finally, Debra Johns is the Associate Director of Admission at Yale University. She has worked in admissions, residential life, and alumni relations at Yale, Fairfield, Marquette. Do you see the crossover? Connecticut College, UVM. She's the tie that binds here. St. Michael's. She is also the former New England Association of College Admissions Counselors President, former chair of the NACAC Finance Committee, and current member of the NACAC Government Relations Committee. She was also recognized in 2018 with the Harry Carroll Award, the highest award of service and contributions to the profession at the New England Association of College Admissions Counselors. So, welcome all. Thank you for being here with us. I've been beginning these webinars with one common question, or two common questions. The first of which is, what is one truth about college admission? And I've standardly asked our guests that question to begin with. And tonight I'd like to begin with that question because we're in challenging times in our country. And there's a lot of pain, and there always has been a lot of pain, but it's I think a really important moment. I would say the one truth that I know about college admission is that it is very inequitable. There's not a level playing field in college admission, and that's one enduring truth. And there are amazing people who are working on issues of equity in admission, and many leaders on those fronts. But we have a long way to go. and it is an unjust system that's kind of rooted in some really unequal and racist in many ways systems. So what I'd love to do is just take a minute here, because I don't know that my words could possibly even start to touch on really the importance of this moment. And I'd love to just take a minute of silence in honor of the National Day of Mourning that the many civil rights leaders have encouraged us to honor today. So we're going to take a minute just to reflect on that, and then we will launch into the webinar. Thank you. Thank you for joining me with that. It is also a very human process, and we are fortunate to have so many thoughtful leaders with us tonight. And so I'd love just to throw that question about kind of admission truths to you all. And Deb, I'll start with you. You know, what do you see as one of the big truths about admission?
You know, I've been doing this for a while, and thank you, Brennan, for having that moment of silence. I think it was, if we'd gone for 8 minutes, it would have been a long time, but it's really wonderful of us to make that acknowledgement. I've been thinking a lot about this. What is one truth? Because I think there are multiple truths about admissions. And I am actually going to hearken back to my Marquette days, because Ken and I worked with a person who I found something he said during one of our literal admitted student programs. It's always something I think about an awful lot about, especially working for the institution that I do, that there really is not one perfect college for a student, that there are actually multiple really great fits. And a student can thrive and blossom and transform in many different places. And it's up to the student and it's up to the institution to make sure that the institution provides good enough information, thorough enough information, accessible enough information so that students can make great decisions and find those multiple great fits, not just one. That would be my truth. That I sort of copied and stole from a former boss.
It's all fair game. Ken, do you want to go next, and then we'll go Ryan?
Sure. My truth is that I worked, that Deb and I shared a wall at Marquette. And actually, Deb is the reason I am in this profession, but that's probably not the most important truth that your folks want to hear about. The one that I usually like to share with folks involves some interactivity. So I'm just going to trust that everybody who's viewing is going to participate along with me. I usually do this in the form of a quiz, Brennan.
All right.
Which is, there are, by any measure, more than 2,000 four-year colleges and universities that are nonprofit institutions in the United States. What percentage of those colleges accept more than half of their applicants. And now this is usually the part that when I've got a group, people will like start throwing out numbers like 5% or
we can have people throw in the chat.
Seriously? Let's do it. Let's do it. It can be fun. Okay.
All right. If you're still paying attention, throw your answers in the chat.
60. All right, William, good job. Probably 80, 10%, 75, 95, 70, 75. Okay. You know what's really cool?
You could be an entrepreneur.
Like on the more positive side of this, and somebody actually nailed it. Somebody already got it. I'm going to go up to Lori. Well done. It's about 85%. 85% of the colleges in the United States, 85% admit more than half of their applicants. Most people are surprised when they hear that, but I can see from all the high numbers here that maybe most of you aren't. So good on you for having access to good information about the process. According to the National Association for College Admission Counseling, which is the organization that we're all a part of, I think the average acceptance rate, and Brennan, feel free to correct me on this, is about 63%, 64%.
Yeah, about 2/3, yeah.
Yeah, so, and I know you're talking to people who work with pretty highly selective colleges here, but I say that mostly to let you know that most of the stories we hear in the New York Times or the Post or whatever focus on how hard it is to get into college. And we love to hear stories about the student who did everything right and got shut out at all their top schools because, you know, that makes for good storytelling. But most students are getting into the colleges that they're applying to. And the only real drama in the process is which one of the multiple colleges that they're going to get into is the one that they ultimately choose. So the thing I would want to remind all of you of is that you've got enormous agency in this process, maybe more than the world would lead you to believe, if you believe everything you read on the interwebs. So that's a truth.
All right, thank you, Ryan. First of all, you get the points for the best background. Do anything. I mean, from your vantage point, you really are looking out over Lake Champlain, right?
Well, yes, and according to every college brochure you've ever seen, this is the scene here, right? So I think I'm going to follow what Debra said, and I think the truth is, I've been in this business for 20 years. It's not what you know, it's who you know. And the reason I say that is because the most important person to get to know in this process is yourself, you know, and I think we as colleges don't necessarily do a great job of distinguishing ourselves from another. And I know many of you who are on this broadcast tonight probably have, 20, 30, 40, 50 college brochures sitting on your desk or under your bed. And you probably notice some themes. It's always sunny on a college campus. Professors are always outside, sitting in rocking chairs. Students have their fists on their chins. And it's always diverse, right? So you'll see scenes, there'll be Black kids and white kids, and we're holding hands, hoping you'll come be diverse with us, right? And it's hard for you to distinguish one college from another, public, private, small, large. And I think that process of self-exploration is absolutely critical. And I encourage students, as you get to know yourself, and there are actually 3 knows that I talk about, know your options, know the process, and most importantly, know yourself. But if you can, and I'm going to give you an assignment that you can, do at some point this summer. I encourage students to write an undergraduate mission statement. And the undergraduate mission statement, perhaps 4 or 5 sentences long, it defines the experience that you're looking for, okay? Agnostic of brand name, right? I want you to think about what you're looking for. So, my name is Laura. I'm looking for an undergraduate college that has between 10 and 20,000 students, that offers an array of great leadership and service programs with study abroad experiences, et cetera. Start to define that. And obviously we all go through a lifelong process of exploration, but I think it's important for you to kind of think about who you are, not who your peers are and what their aspirations are. And that will help align you with many of the best fit colleges that Debra mentioned. So it's not what you know, it's who you know that will lead you to success in this process. And that most important who is you.
I love that. Thank you. Yeah, it's like your college elevator pitch almost, being able to articulate that. That's great. Okay, so the next question, and then we'll open it up to the chat. The next question is around character, and it's a question I've asked every set of webinar panelists, and that's just kind of what role does character, and maybe we'll start with you, and then go Ryan, and Deb, and what role does character play in college admission?
I think character is going to play probably a larger role in this admission cycle than maybe it ever has, just because everything that you are going through as students right now is really unprecedented. And it's an unmeasurable thing. I think one of the things about the college admission process is we tend to hang our hats on the quantifiable GPA, course selection, test scores. We can talk about test scores later. But the experiences that you're having right now and what you're not having right now are probably very difficult, and are going to give you some places to tell your story, maybe a story you weren't expecting to have. But the sort of things that you have had to deal with in this, I think are going to give you some opportunities, like Ryan said, to know yourself maybe in a different way. For us in our institution, and I can only speak for mine, I know that we're looking for students who aren't perfect. You don't have to be perfect. We're looking for folks who are intellectually engaged. Maybe somebody stumbled out of the gates in their first year in secondary school, but has been building up a head of steam, has had to really show some grit and determination to get there. And so for us, it goes way beyond the numbers and the quantifiable, and to get to know who you are a little bit more, and the story of the type of person, not just that you are right now, but maybe the visions of who you want to be. That's one of the things I find most interesting about this process. When folks like us get to live at the intersection of who you are and the dreams you're pursuing, and it's a real privilege to be able to do that. I'm going to stop talking and cede my time to my colleagues.
That's great. Thanks. Ryan, what do you think?
I thought that, Ken's synopsis was excellent. And if I could boil down the admissions process, and, as you mentioned before, I spent 15 years at the University of Virginia before taking on this role at University of Vermont. And I've had the great fortune of, working with some colleagues from great institutions and chatting with them about their processes. And if I can boil down the process as related to selective college admission, we're trying to answer 3 questions. Can you do the work? Will you do the work? 2 different questions. What will you add otherwise? Now, the difference between can do and will do is rooted in character, right? So some of those qualities that Ken mentioned, perseverance, grit, etc. So not only does that separate the folks who are bright and are able to do the work, but people who are going to make intellectual contributions. And then what will you add otherwise? We're not just looking for people who are going to boost our stat profiles. We're looking for people who are going to be great roommates, great lunchmates, classmates, etc. And a lot of that's rooted in character. And in fact, our process at University of Vermont, specifically a couple of years ago, we did a redesign, and we started to look at, some of those characters, or take a deeper look at some of those character-based traits or character-adjacent traits. And we've started to discover that those are actually more well aligned with student outcomes. So character is super important, and I'll stop so Debra can go.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. All right, Deb.
Wow. Well, the gentlemen have done a very good job of talking about character as they would. Yeah, character is the thing that really separates students out for us, because I think, and students display their character in lots of different ways. And so, the questions that Ryan posed in terms of, we're asking similar questions, can they do the work? And there's evidence that shows that they can do the work through teacher recommendations and high school transcripts and rigor and course selection and such. But then the second, slightly tweaked, is what will they add to our community, and that, where do we find evidence of that, and where do we find where their character fits well with the kind of community that we have on our campus, where we know that they'll thrive and have the opportunity to transform. And I think that you find that through essays and the way that they write about themselves, and especially if different institutions ask you to write different things, that helps you to show that character in lots of different ways. And so to be able to think about the various ways you'll see in the Common App and Coalition App and other kinds of applications that you can use as your platform to apply, that you will be able to share yourself in lots of different ways. I always sort of think of this as a kaleidoscope. So showing that character, not just being, okay, I'm an academician, and so whatever I do, I can't really stray from that. As Ryan kind of mentioned, we're looking for people who are going to be really active citizens on our campus and are going to be active citizens within the community where we reside, and will be active citizens of the world. And so I think those are the things that, again, through essays, through recommendations, through the way that you present yourself, if you are able to interview at a particular institution, that showcases different ways that can display your character in lots of lovely ways, so that it's all nice and layered, so when an admission officer reads your file, that you're able to, they can, it's sort of, I always use the Star Wars analogy of, the little out of R2-D2 and, Princess Leia coming out and
hologram. Yeah,
exactly. But it's not the admission, movie. It's sort of like that. I want that person to come to life through the ways, and the life is for me on the non-academic side, in some respect, are all the other things that sort of come into play that give students more dimension. So character is super duper important in the process.
Thanks. Meanwhile, most applicants are trying to use their Jedi mind tricks to get inside your head and see what you're looking for.
And Brennan, that can completely backfire. When you're like, I have to put on a dress or a tie, and I'm writing for the Yale admissions office, so I have to use words that I have never in my life used in an essay, or, or what does she want to read? Right. That's a bad strategy, trying to get into the minds of an admissions officer. That typically backfires.
Great point. So we're going to open it up to the chat. So folks, write in your questions, and we will start from there. So here's a question: how will admission officers look at our grades if our school is pass-fail, and how will they look at, will they look more at freshman and sophomore year? Does anybody want to take that? And Ken, you want to start? Yeah, go for it.
Sure. I can speak with great empathy on this, because all of our students are doing pass-fail on campus right now. And so we know that different students are going to have different circumstances. And at least speaking for my institution, context matters, right? There are going to be a whole lot of things about students' junior years this year, which is usually the last thing we see before you apply. So we're going to be looking at trends. I know we're going to look at what your first year and your second year look like, and the first part of your third year. And if we have to look at your first semester of your senior year, it's probably not a bad sign. It's because we want to get a little bit more information and see if you're still going at the same clip that you were going at beforehand. But I think colleges are going to be approaching many colleges will be approaching this process with an enormous amount of empathy, trying to seek an understanding.
Are there ways, Ryan, maybe you could take this one. Are there ways that your office is adapting how you're going to read applications differently because of this, as you look at next year? You know, preferencing, you know, focusing on different things or changing things?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that we're going to have to be flexible. And fortunately for us, we had already started moving in the direction to look at more qualitative, you know, indicators. And so I do think that, you know, quite frankly, the, you know, students that are applying this year, you know, will be taking a really, not that we weren't before intensely looking at your essays, but, you know, a lot of you are going to have a really good story to tell. And so I think, you know, within that lies a great opportunity. And also too, I think there's, you know, within all of the other sort of qualitative measures, you know, considering your extracurricular, you know, activities and whatnot, I've been encouraging students to, if you are thinking about applying to specific schools and you're thinking about people who are, you know, writing your recommendation letters, for example, which will be another, you know, perhaps point of emphasis, you know, make sure that one, they know, you know, what your goals are, but also two, you know, I would use this opportunity to ask them lots of questions because again, that whole process of self-exploration is going to be critically important. And so perhaps, you know, I see a lot of questions popping up about, you know, SAT scores and pass-fail grades, but, you know, truth be told, you know, just dig deep inside yourself. You have a great story to tell. And as Ken mentioned, you know, that senior year could, you know, be impactful as well. But we as colleges are asking those questions and spending a lot of hours, you know, a day kind of thinking about what we're going to do to be accommodating and flexible, knowing that this senior class, this rising senior class has had the most spectacular, you know, circumstances of any in recent memory.
That's a great point. Deb, do you want to take this? There's a question, kind of related question from Peter about how do you account for low socioeconomic background in extracurriculars and essays?
Sure.
I think that's a really important question, and I know you all in your office have been pretty. I mean, all three of your offices have been pretty articulate about this.
Well, you know, we are a member of the Questbridge Scholars Organization, and you know, of the, I don't know, 36,000 applications we receive a year, about 4,000 of them come through Questbridge, and that's for high achieving, low income students. And so for us, when we read an application and we read it from front to back cover, that's another truth, is that we read it from front to back cover and everything in between. In this whole person review that we utilize to, you know, review applicants, context for us is really, really important. And so for us to be able to, you know, one of the platforms that one can apply to specifically at my institution is using the Questbridge application. And that really sort of leans on context. So that gives us a lot of opportunity to learn more about the background of a student. And, you know, the front to back cover, you may think that when you're putting in the biographical or demographical information of parents and, you know, where you live and what you've been doing and your extracurricular activities, that all is actually providing us some context of where you come from. And, you know, if we learn about high schools, you know, context always also includes the high school and the resources associated at the high school. And so we all we read regionally. And so we pour through high school profiles and websites, and we call ourselves admission officers. And so each of us get to be experts of the particular area that we cover. So I cover, I don't know, 8 states and a little bit of Massachusetts as well. And, you know, it's my responsibility when I go in the committee room to make sure that the people around the table learn as much about Maine as I know about Maine to provide them, or New Hampshire, or Wisconsin, or Washington State. You know, so again, providing that geographic context. You know, and I think that context for, like, we don't expect students to be able to access resources that they don't have access to. And so that is also part of the contextual piece. You know, I always say it's a part, the life experience, the family background, you know, what you've been able to access. And that can work conversely, because if you're at a place like the Derryfield School that has a good amount of resources and students can access great courses, so there's a higher expectation from my particular institution. Well, how have you done that? You know, how have you dug into the things that are available to you there? And have there been any barriers? You know, that would also be one of the things as readers we are searching. Have there been barriers where you haven't been able to do everything that you wanted to do at an institution because of one thing or another? I can't really do 8 extracurricular activities because I have to go home and take care of my siblings, or I help to pay the family bills, and so I work 15 or 20 hours a week, or I am expected to pay half of my college tuition, so I have to work at McDonald's, or I have to work at Caribou Coffee, or I have to work, you know, at the bagel factory up in Burlington. So, you know, like there's lots of ways that we look for that context. So the socioeconomic piece is something we take very seriously within our office. And I would say that that would be part, as Ryan mentioned, in terms of the self-reflection. I'm sorry, I'm taking probably too much time, but the self-reflection and the research you should do in terms of what's important to the institution that you're researching, you know, because that will be part of the campus culture and the campus vibe in terms of, you know, does socioeconomic diversity matter? How is it attended to? How does the disparity and unevenness of where students come from to a place, you know, how do they make it a more even experience? You know, there's all kinds of things that you can do and research and see what is what's important to that institution. Is it important for the students not only to be diverse in certain ways, but to be socioeconomically diverse? And I think that that's something that you can, as a student, research pretty deeply as you're looking at schools.
And really get a sense for how it plays out on campus too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would just add that there are lots of ways to kind of communicate that in an application, whether it's writing about something in an essay or in the other information section. The Common App now has a place under activities where you can list family responsibilities and how you spent your time doing that. And so it's really important for students to communicate that, and they don't always think to communicate that. There's also, in light of COVID and everything that's happened this spring, the Common App has a separate question for students to talk about how this current crisis has kind of affected them and their family, if it has. And now Coalition App also has a set of checkboxes that students can list whether they've been impacted. So there are ways to communicate that. All right. So, and if you all see questions in the side here that you want to answer, you let me know. Can we just talk about this deferral issue that has come up again and again, and we'll just kind of see where it is right now, maybe at your schools. But you know, there's a lot of concern among juniors, especially, that the number of seniors, this year's seniors, soon to be graduates from high school, will defer going to college, and that will then limit the number of kind of spots available for them in the following year for rising seniors. Ken, do you want to speak to that, or?
I'm Yeah, we're talking about what that might mean here at our institution. If you think about it from an enrollment manager's, not that high school students are thinking about enrollment management, but if you're thinking about an institution being of a certain size, I think about my own. We're a small liberal arts college of 1,500 students. If we have 10% of our students defer to next year, that we're still, what that means is many colleges are actually not at full capacity. And so there is a lot of room in colleges. I can't say that for the most highly selective colleges, and certainly not for my colleagues here, but many colleges have room to grow. And so that is actually going to be less of a worry. I think it's going to be more of a worry for colleges actually in what their first year is going to look like and having a smaller class load. On the other hand, it might also mean that it's easier to pull off in-person learning because you'll have a lower classroom density, something we're all spending a lot more time talking about than we ever thought we would spend talking about. But yeah, it's something that I think is going to be a concern at some schools, but at many schools out there, I'd say it's not going to be as much of a worry for students in general.
Ryan, are you seeing kind of an increase in deferral requests or anything, any trends you're seeing?
Yeah. We've seen a few more this year, but mostly I would say the difference, and shout out to Louise Larson, proud Catamount mom in the chat. So I think a lot of students are actually exploring, as opposed to saying, I definitively want to take a gap year, because I think, quite frankly, a lot of students are playing the wait and see game to determine whether or not colleges are actually going to be open in the fall. And that's kind of a wild card. But, we're going to be as flexible as we possibly can. And, while the number has gone up slightly, I have seen more people inquire about it as opposed to, applicants officially declaring that that's what they're going to do. But it's something, as Ken mentioned, we've got our eye on, and we're just going to have to be flexible.
Great. So, and then the other big issue here in the chat, and maybe you can just raise your hand if you want to address this, but is the test optional movement. And I mean, even in the last 24 hours, we've seen Columbia and UVA, right? Ryan, your old stomping ground, UVA and Dartmouth and UPenn today, and a number of other schools, Texas Tech going test optional. Any thoughts on kind of trends, how this is moving, how it will change admission, or should students submit testing, all those issues?
Who wants to take this one? I mean, I'll show my bias. We've been test optional since long before the cool kids did it, so I'll wait.
Yeah, I'm happy to make a comment.
Go for it.
Me too.
Okay.
So the thing I'm going to say is, it's something that we've been thinking about, and, particularly the ethos of, I've been really fortunate to work at two universities who really value socioeconomic diversity, and, to think about some of the, correlations between wealth and standardized test scores. So this conversation is one that has emerged for us specifically even before COVID, but we just have to there are a number of factors to kind of think about, and it's complicated, but I do think that ultimately the decision we're going to make, and it's one I'm actually not only on a committee at a University of Vermont, but I've been fortunate to be on an access and diversity collaborative at the college board. So just kind of thinking about what we need to do in order to ensure that applicants have the best opportunity to put themselves forward. We have the best opportunity to evaluate them. Yes, it seems like every hour there's a new school that is declaring that they're going, test optional. But yeah, I think honestly, just like we have said just broadly about the application process, ultimately, can you do the work and will you do the work? And for us, the most important piece is the transcript. And again, that relates to character, erring on the side of someone who has, taken really solid courses, who have who has earned great marks relative to the scale in that school, with perhaps a lower standardized test profile versus someone who has an astronomical test profile and not achieved as much. So the key word here is flexible, but yeah, that's definitely a big trend and a hot topic. So Debra, I'll pass the mic to you.
Thanks. Well, I think that when a couple days ago, when the issue became that students wouldn't be able to access the test in certain areas in the country and around the world, then it became an issue of access, and that is something that we just not necessarily tolerate. And so I think that decisions like this are not made in a vacuum, and they almost always include people outside of the admission office and such. And so, I think that you will probably see from my particular institution something on the horizon soon, but it has to kind of go through the processes because— Is
that a scoop, Deb?
Maybe.
But
the thing is, I will say though, it will be if we do anything, it's not going to be something that will be changed for all time. It will be changed because the situation is made it impossible for students to produce a piece of evidence that we actually have found very helpful in our process. We had already changed the SAT-2 so that we would not ask, we've always had them optional, but we're actually not looking at them and not having them be part of our admission process. And this year, and that was something that was a relatively easy thing to do when we looked at the statistics and we looked at the number of students who had taken the test and just all kinds of things. We always do a lot of research with our Office of Institutional Research. And I think that, this year is anomalous. And so, as I wrote in an email to my dean today, it's going to be a wild ride this year, but we'll get through it because we will have to look at lots of things in a different light. And, that's actually even changed. We usually have 2 retreats a year. They happen in May and June, and they're long full day processes. We're having a number of strategic planning 3-hour sessions every week to look at every single aspect of our admissions operation and how we pivot to a more virtual experience, or more, and actually in a very soon to happen retreat is when we talk about what we will do in terms of reading applications, when we will have different touch points to look at.
Oh, that's great. Well, we'll have you back. So I do want to just talk about this issue of early decision, early action as well, because for example, in UVA's and University of Virginia's announcement today about testing, they announced also that they're pushing their early action deadline back to November 1st from October 15th. Any thoughts on whether or not there's plans at your schools? Are you hearing from others about pushing deadlines back or changing the way it happens? Or, I've heard from some schools that they're planning on leaning heavier on early decision and early action this year because they, who knows what's going to be down the line next spring, and so they want to kind of get people in the door. Any thoughts, Ken? Do you want to?
Yeah, I'd actually tie it together with, I don't know if it's Caroline or Carolyn who asked the question about if colleges will start to open for campus visits, because I think that's also part of this, which is just the entire cycle of how colleges are operating right now. I know we're getting ready if you've been following Wisconsin politics, you know, we've been treating the pandemic, I mean, it's over out here. I mean, our state Supreme Court said so just a couple weeks ago. So Wisconsin's actually getting ready to open back up, and we're going to start welcoming visitors like one family at a time in a couple of weeks. Very, very carefully. I just walked past the plexiglass that we installed at our visitor counter in the admissions office. But I think, like we saw this year with many colleges extending their student reply date, I think you're going to just see a shift a little bit later. It's not going to be universal, but I think you're going to see a lot of colleges moving early decision, moving early action, partly because we also don't know what the school year is going to be like for students either. Will high schools be open? How will they be open? And so partly, I think this buys time and also builds a little bit of sanity into the process. At least that's what I'm hoping for. So we've begun that conversation at Lawrence. We have early decision, early action, and regular decision, but we know that it's going to be a pretty fluid situation for folks.
That's great. Other thoughts from others? That kind of covers it. Okay.
Yeah, I don't see us changing. I don't see us changing dates at all. That hasn't been part of our earlier conversations. In Connecticut, we still believe that COVID is alive and present. And our governor.
Oh, it's alive and present in Wisconsin. It's just been highly politicized.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, so we're actually following the lead of our governor, and I know that our president is in constant contact, and so you know, we actually don't believe that we're going to be able to host live visitors on campus in any capacity, at least through the fall semester. You know, we're sort of planning to have a totally digital experience, which is not ideal. It's best to visit any place in real time. But when we think about how to keep our students and staff and faculty safe in a city, it seems nearly impossible to guarantee that we can make that happen. And we're already thinking about, you know, we have a really small presentation room, and on an average day that seats only 54 people, you know, and when you start thinking about, well, on the best day and social distancing, that's 20 people, which equates to 6 families, when usually we host anywhere from 200 to 300 people on campus for a visit. It's impossible. You know, I should never say impossible, because that's very short-sighted, but it's a challenge that I think is really tough, really steep.
So for all three of you, just a kind of a brief question, and that's, if you had to give kind of one tidbit about how a student can get, you know, outside just the, you know, obviously doing the virtual events and doing the virtual tours and things like that, what's a really great way you would suggest that a student get to know a school in this circumstance? Ryan, do you want to start?
Yeah,
so you don't have to be, you know, earth-shattering or anything, just some tip.
Yeah, I think that, you know, based on the fact that live campus visits may be limited, I might try to, and this is just kind of a creative idea, you know, perhaps post-COVID creativity here, but I would try to find maybe 3 or 4 people who represent that community, and maybe see if they would take the time to do an informal interview. So it could be an admissions person, it could be, you know, a student, maybe, you know, somebody who is on the faculty or another administrator, you know, so do that in conjunction with, you know, looking at I think a valuable way to discover a school is to, beyond, the information that we as admissions send you, if you go to the homepage of any institution. Now, it's a little bit different with COVID because usually at the top of institutional websites now is this big like COVID header, like COVID updates.
Yeah.
Yeah, but beyond that, you can get a sense of, based on the news feed and the rotating stories, if you look over the course of about a week or so, you can get a real sense of what the institutional priorities are. So if you look at that institutional website for say 7 days in a row, and on 4 of those days they have information about scholarship, on 3 of those days they have information about service, you can get a little bit of sense of the ethos of the place beyond what the enrollment team has presented to you.
That's a great idea. I hadn't heard that one. Just kind of keep going back to see, do a kind of a week span and check out what they're doing. That's great. Ken?
We know that we can't keep people off our campus. So even for those folks that do want to visit and traipse through, we may not be able to offer them an in-person visit and anything, but there's something even just about the physical experience. It is a public space, so we can't tell people not to come and check the place out. You can check out the town, the community, get a feel for what that's like, and aggressively follow us on social media. And follow our students, not necessarily, follow our account, that's where all the really good stuff is. But yeah, track on some students and see what they have to say, or how they're responding to the institution's posts.
Sounds like a subtle invitation from the VP of Enrollment.
I'd say yes, find your way to Appleton, Wisconsin, where all your dreams will come true. We do have jet service into Appleton on Delta, United, and American Airlines, and the airport is only 6 miles from campus. Very easy to get to using Uber and/or Lyft.
And COVID doesn't exist there anymore.
Like I said, the Supreme Court eradicated it with a 4-3 vote down party lines.
All right, Deb, one quick tidbit on searching.
On searching, I am a big advocate of looking at anything that students write, and I think that we've moved, like a lot of places have moved to blogs and vlogs and podcasts, and, there's some really good content out there. I've been doing a lot of searching just to make sure that we're finding the right balance of virtual content. Because, when I'm not an admissions officer traveling to schools and reading files, I am the lead person for hospitality. So this is something that, what the campus visit. And so just sort of thinking about what's out there. And there's some really cool things that institutions are doing to keep it as live and real as possible. And most times the things that I find most organic and real and fun include students. There's an institution that has, incorporated this kind of cool virtual live tour where you can actually ask the people questions as they're walking around campus. And, my dean was like, so what do? They wear a GoPro and they just walk around? I go, no, it's a stationary camera and it's really cool and you can ask questions, and it's not perfect because you can hear things in the background, but when you're out on tour, by the way, you can hear things in the background. And so to me, it felt really real. There's another institution that has kind of pulled together a lot of really cool video content from lots of different areas around their campus, and kind of, here's what academics might be like. This is what residential life might be like. But again, it's mostly through the lens of students, and I think that's spot on. Like, I think that is really good content and gives you a great sense of a place, because through the students' eyes, the way they interact with each other, the way they talk about their classes, the way they're talking about living and such, I think that that's where you can really get some good stuff. In YouTube, I have a 19 and a 21-year-old, and we, some of them, I know, Ken, I know.
No, they were just born.
I know, no, they're both college students. And they're on YouTube all the time, and they're looking at all the TikTok and this, that, and the other thing. And, that stuff resonates. So I say, if there isn't, if it's out there and it's about an institution, you're going to get a feel for the vibe. And it is, it's important, you know, so that's my more
All
than
right.
long one tidbit.
Stay tuned for the Deb Johns YouTube channel. We're getting towards the end here, and I want to be conscious of your very gracious time. In maybe 1 minute, a question I've been asking all my guests, and Ken, I'm going to start with you, and then we'll go Deb and Ryan. If you had to do your college search over, what would you tell your younger you?
I would tell myself to not look to what my friends were doing as I was building my college list. I would actually try to find colleges that fit well with my talents and my aspirations. I tended to follow the crowd. I tended to follow names I knew. I didn't look at colleges I had never heard of. I'm thrilled with the choice I made, but there was a whole class of colleges, like the one I work at right now, small liberal arts college, that I didn't even bother to look at because it was smaller than my high school. I would have said, Kenny, because that's how I would have talked to myself, have a more open mind about this process. There's more than one college for you. And if you haven't heard of it, doesn't mean it's not going to be a great fit for you.
Well, Kenny, you've come a long way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Deb?
Yes, nice job, Ken. You know, I'm a first-generation college student, and I think as a junior, and I would have said, man, you should have, I love the place where I went, and you know, St. Mike's undergrad, UVM grad, they were fantastic. They were probably the best fit for me, but I think I only applied to 2 colleges. Of course, it was back in the dinosaur age, and those 2 places. And so I had 2 choices because I loved Burlington, Vermont, and Winooski, Vermont. And so in retrospect, why didn't I look at a place like Yale? I was a good student, you know, I did well, but I was really narrowly focused. And again, a little bit like Ken, I wasn't self-confident enough. I hadn't done that self-reflection enough. I listened to people and kind of followed, you know, what my college counselor said, and which was, you know, great and ended up being fine. But I wish in retrospect, I would have pushed back a little bit, and I would have dreamt a little bit bigger than I did. So, but it's all worked out. It's all been good. But I think that would be what I would say, is to not sell yourself too short. Or
Yeah, that's great. Well, they say New Haven is the Winooski of Connecticut, don't they? All right, Ryan, finish us off here.
Yeah, so I think if I was looking back and talking to my former self, I would probably just tweak my approach. And, you know, I think there's a beautiful opportunity for folks going through this process to do self-exploration. So, you know, I like jingles, so I probably would have made myself a jingle. I probably would have said something like, you know, on your ESSAY, I can't lie. Don't you even try to be another girl, to be another guy. Don't you dare lie. Be yourself. Mind your health. That's how you achieve personal wealth.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, just be yourself and take a risk. Honestly, I think it's easy to try to, you know, be guarded and you know, a lot of applicants are trying to sort of present themselves as well-rounded, right? Like, oh, I'm a great student. I got a little music. I got a little athletics. I got some service, you know, and I saved a kitten from the top of a mountain, you know, and I think honestly, like, our angular selves are beautiful. Don't be afraid of all those pointy, rough edges. Just go for it. Be yourself.
That's great. Well, that is a wonderful message to end things out on. Thank you all so much for joining us and for sharing your wisdom and sharing your Thursday night with us. It's been really, I've learned a lot over these last 2 months, and especially tonight, and hopefully we'll pick this back up at some point. And in the meantime, I hope you all stay well and be well and absolutely be kind. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Brennan.
Thanks, Brennan. Thank you all.
Thank you, guys. Great working with you.